In this video, we're going to be discussing Rabbi Yisroel Baal Shem Tov, the famous Baal Shem Tov founder of the Chassidic movement. He was born in the year 1698. His father's name was Eliezer. His mother's name was Sarah. Apparently, he was born at an extremely old age. There's a lot of stories surrounding his birth. Essentially, that his father was rewarded for his hachnasas orchem, his having guests, and was even though they were childless till an old age, he was born as a gift to them, as promised by the prophet Elijah, following a certain incident we're not going to get into now. And some people say that when he was born, his father and mother could have been almost 100. At any rate, he was born somewhere in Poland, in what today would be Ukraine, and he was orphaned as you can imagine, someone being born to elderly parents. He was orphaned at a young age. His mother passed away, and his father passed away by the time he was 5 years old. He was orphaned from both his mother and his father. His father's last words to him are extremely important and really, in a way, define what will be his life. And his father told him, only fear God, don't fear anybody else, and love every Jew with all your heart. And this kind of becomes his really the two key cornerstones of the Chassidic movement that he would found later. He loved to. He became a ward of the community. Essentially, he really loved to be in solitude. He would go to the forest. He would spend a lot of time. And again, he wasn't afraid of anything. His father had told him, "Don't be afraid of anything." So he wasn't afraid of the forest. He was only in fear of God Himself. Eventually, he gets involved with. Certain people realized how special he was, and he gets involved with a group of mystics. And let's get into this idea of what these mystics were. At around the middle of the 16th century, around the year 1555 or so, there starts this movement of Baal Shems. A Baal Shem is a miracle worker, a healer using Kabbalistic names and treatises and potions to do miracles and heal people. Starting with, we have just a little bit, to give you a little bit of idea. There's the Eliyahu Baal Shem of Worms. There's Eliyahu Baal Shem of Chelm. There's Rabbi Yitzchak Zakalei Baal Shem of Michelstadt. There's Rabbi Yoel Baal Shem of Zamot. There's Rabbi Adam Baal Shem of Rubshitz, who ends up becoming the one of the teachers of the Baal Shem Tov. We'll see about that in a minute. And later, Rabbi Chaim Shmuel Yaakov Falk, the Baal Shem of London, whose picture actually becomes circulated as the picture of the Baal Shem Tov, when it was not. It was this Baal Shem of London, apparently. So there is no picture of the Baal Shem Tov. The famous picture that is known as to be the Baal Shem Tov is actually this Baal Shem of London. So he gets involved in this thing, and eventually this group of mystics, he's hidden tzaddikim, these hidden righteous people, and eventually he becomes the leader of the group at a very young age. And he starts to communicate with Rabbi Adam Baal Shem. They never actually meet. Apparently, they were not meant to meet. And the Baal Shem Tov would go to the Carpathian Mountains. And one time, somebody told him that there was a message for him. The non-Jews there used to call him Srul, like a diminutive of Yisroel. And he finds these letters, and he starts this communication with Rabbi Adam Baal Shem. And he tells him that essentially that he's going to have a special teacher, and that his teacher is going to get him ready to reveal himself to the world. Now, the Baal Shem Tov, at this point, like we said, he was the head of this hidden mystics. They were not revealed. These Baal Shems, were revealed, but Baal Shem Tov himself, Rabbi Yisroel, was not revealed. Nobody knew who he was. He pretended that he was a simpleton. He acted as if he could not even read. In one of his trips, in fact, he met the Rav of Brody, and he meets this Rav. His name was Rabbi Ephraim of Brody, and he reveals himself to this rabbi, and he shows him how he's a great scholar and an amazing a tzaddik, and he acts like, as befitting such a person. And the Rav of Brody right away offers him the marriage of his daughter, and they signed a contract. And again, this is the Rav of Brody was out of town and met the Baal Shem Tov somewhere, and the Baal Shem Tov comes, and and right away after this happens, the Rav of Brody passes away from his family. The Baal Shem Tov shows up to Brody. This family is in mourning, and he says, "Look, I have a contract. I'm your future son-in-law." And his brother, the brother of the bride, his name was Rabbi Gershon Kitover. Rabbi Gershon Kitover ends up, we'll see later, becomes his greatest student. But at that time, he had no idea who he was, and he sees this ignoramus, he doesn't know anything. And he's like, "Listen, I'll try to teach you." And the bride agrees. The Baal Shem Tov reveals himself to his future bride, and she agrees to marry him. And they live a simple life. He was a porter. He did all kinds of menial jobs. But again, he used to spend most of his time in the mountains. And eventually he meets his teacher. His teacher, he ends up finding out later, is none other than Achia HaShiloni. Achia HaShiloni was one of the people who left Egypt, lived in the desert, and ends up being the teacher of Elijah, who is obviously famous for being the much of Kabbalistic work is based on the teachings of Elijah. So in a way, Achia Shiloni is his teacher. And when the Baal Shem Tov writes to his brother, Rabbi Gershon Kitover, which he later revealed himself to him even before he became publicly known as a miracle worker and the founder of the Chassidic movement, he reveals to him that that when he found out who his teacher was, he was filled with dread. And he essentially becomes a hermit for 10 years, from the age of 26 to the age of 36. And he just every Sunday morning he would head out to the mountains with a bag of food, and he would be so engrossed in his studies with his teacher that he would come back on Friday afternoon before Shabbos to spend Shabbos with his family. He would still have all the food would be intact. He didn't eat. He was just so engrossed in his studies. It wasn't like fasting, wasn't trying to be, but that's what ended up happening. After 10 years, the Rabbi Adam Baal Shem tells him this is his time. He has to reveal himself as a miracle worker and a healer, and to start this Chassidic movement. The Baal Shem Tov, just to go back a little bit, throughout his time as being not being a revealed person, he also was a Bahelfer. He was a teacher's assistant, and basically what we call today a bus driver. He would take the kids, he would walk the kids from school, collect them, and bring them home. And later, his successor, Rabbi Dover Mezrich, known as the Maggid of Mezrich, would say that he wished that he could kiss the Torah with the same love that the Baal Shem Tov kissed the children that he would take to school. And the Baal Shem Tov eventually he reveals himself, and he starts this Chassidic movement. He focuses on simple people. At that time, simple people were ignored. There was, if you didn't have money, if you didn't have a good education, which is very hard to come by in those years. Again, we're talking in the early 18th century. It's very hard to get to have any kind of status in the community, and these people were ignored. The Baal Shem Tov also eventually uses stories. He would go to marketplaces, stand up on a soapbox, and tell stories about tzaddikim and try to engage these people. And one of his main teachings was Rachmana Libabai, that God wants the heart, meaning that God wants the passion of Judaism. It's not enough to be religious, but we have to be passionate about Judaism. And he realized these simple folk, even though they were not very well educated, but they would say Tehillim, they would learn a little bit that they were able to learn, or pray. They would do it with such a passion. The Baal Shem Tov wanted to ignite that and show that we need to be passionate Jews, not just robotic Jews. And God forbid to say that he was against doing Torah and mitzvahs. The Baal Shem Tov wanted people to do Torah and mitzvahs and do it in the most in the best way possible, and very strict on halacha and those kind of things. He also starts to teach what will become later Chassidic philosophy. And let's just talk a little bit about what is Chassidus and what is he teaching. And he ends up getting 60 students, famously. And his philosophy is based on, the Chassidus is based in Kabbalah. It's based in Lurianic Kabbalah specifically. However, it really is about the essence. We talked about earlier that Baal Shem is traditionally somebody who heals with using Kabbalistic names, but in a way the Baal Shem Tov rose above that. And he really got to the essence. He wasn't really trying. He didn't need names or Kabbalistic methods to heal people or to do a miracle. The Baal Shem Tov got to the essence of what God was and what a Jew is. And in a way, the Baal Shem Tov structured Judaism that we don't do mitzvahs and therefore we're Jewish. He changed it that we do mitzvahs because we're Jewish, and he showed what the essence of a Jew is. And again, this really goes back to his father's last words to him, which is fear only God and love every Jew. And part of those teachings was something what would be later known as his idea of hashgacha pratis, which means divine providence in every single thing. Many people disagree with the Baal Shem Tov, but the Baal Shem Tov basically said that there are godly sparks in every single thing, and God controls the world in a specific way, which means God himself is involved in every single thing that happens in your life, every single thing that happens to a plant, every single thing that happens to an animal, every single thing that happens to an inanimate object. The Baal Shem Tov felt and understood that God is involved in those things. And another one of his teachings was that God is constantly creating the world every moment, and that the world cannot exist without God actively recreating it in every moment. And again, these ideas spark each other, right? So because God is creating the world every moment, therefore God is involved in every detail of the world, and therefore it changes the way you view the world, the way you view service of God. Now let's also talk about the name Baal Shem Tov. We talked about how there was these Baal Shems who were miracle workers and healers. But in a way, the Baal Shem Tov means it's based on a passage from Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot says there's Keser Kahuna, Keser Torah, and Keser Malchus. There's the crown of priesthood, the crown of Torah, and the crown of kingship. And then it says Keser Shem Tov Ola Gabeam, and the crown of a good name goes all above them. In a way, the Baal Shem Tov was saying, the Baal Shem Tov, like we said before, was getting to the essence, right? And what is this Keser Shem Tov Ha'olah Gabeim? What is the crown of a good name that supersedes everything? And the Baal Shem Tov was saying that is God, right? That in godliness and seeing God in every single thing, and that rises above the good name of priesthood means yichus, as we say, your lineage, Torah, your scholarship, or Keser Malchus, your wealth. All those things are superseded by who are you? Who is a Jew? A Jew is really his soul, and the Baal Shem Tov changed Judaism in that way. And then additionally, we could say that the Keser Shem Tov Ola Gabeim, that this crown of a good name that goes above everything, is also could be referring to the fact that the Baal Shem Tov was trying to bring the Mashiach. That was his mission in life. As we see, he wrote one of the letters that he wrote to his brother-in-law, Rabbi Gershon Kitover, that we mentioned earlier. He writes that he had what we call Aliyas HaNeshama. His soul went on high, and it went through all these different chambers. Again, I'm not a Kabbalist, but essentially he had this experience, and he comes to the chamber of Mashiach, and he asks Mashiach, when are you going to come? And the Mashiach says, when your wellsprings, the wellsprings of Baal Shem Tov, will go to the outside, will become spread out through the outside. And this becomes the Baal Shem Tov's mission, is to bring the Mashiach. And this is his teachings, in a way, are a taste of Mashiach. They're the futuristic teachings that will be revealed before the Mashiach, when Mashiach comes. But we're now in that era right before Mashiach. We have to now start to work on them and it's a progressive thing that we have this taste, and through permeating these teachings throughout the world, we will get to the ultimate of Mashiach's teachings. The Baal Shem Tov also experienced, based on his teachings, he experienced a lot of opposition. In his generation, it was not so bad. It was more intellectual. It was against his ideas, his theological ideas, but nobody really viewed him as being a bad person or evil or against Torah or against mitzvahs. It was very clear that was not the case. It was very few and far between. There was also economics involved, where the Baal Shem Tov kind of, again, is promoting simple Jews versus you have the elite scholars, and they're jealous of that. They felt that they were the true, only if scholarship, only through money can you have status in the Jewish community. And here the Baal Shem Tov is lifting up the simple folk. And by the way, he's lifting them up also economically. The Baal Shem Tov worked hard to help these people economically, who were many people who had no education. It was because of their economic status. At any rate, the Baal Shem Tov experienced much opposition. They end up coining the term Chassidim as a pejorative originally, and the meaning that like you're so pious, you're so pious, like almost sarcastic. And the Baal Shem Tov and his followers eventually take that as a pride, and they say, yes, we are Chassidim, we are passionate, and we are pious in our practice and our teachings. The Baal Shem Tov settled in the city of Mezbush. It's somewhere today in Ukraine, and he lived there until his passing. Another part of we'll talk about this passing in 1 second. One of the Baal Shem Tov's important things that he taught was stories, the power of a story, and many stories were said about the Baal Shem Tov. Unfortunately, many people did make up stories, but today we have a lot of stories that are much more. We know, I should say, which stories have been confirmed, which stories have reliable sources based on, for example, the Shivchei Abesht and others. These are written by first-hand accounts of the Baal Shem Tov. Tremendous stories, amazing miracles. We talk about miracles where he, traveled tremendous distances in a few minutes. That's what we call a Kabbalistic idea called kfitzas haderech, which means the jumping of the road. There are miracle stories of him and his students holding hands, and they'll be transported to other worlds, and just a tremendous amount of miracle stories of the Baal Shem Tov. And again, people ended up making up stories because there was a good business. But today we do know what are the more reliable stories. As far as he eventually passes away on Shavuos in 1760 at the age of 62. He passes away, and the Chassidic movement is kind of in a turmoil for about a year. He was succeeded by his son, Rabbi Tzvi. He also had a daughter, by the way, named Adol. Most of the Chassidic Rebbes that trace their lineage to the Baal Shem Tov come from his daughter, Adol. Many stories about her as well. And he passes away. Rabbi Tzvi takes over, and he was not the dynamic leader that his father was. And a year later, at the first yahrzeit of the Baal Shem Tov, he stands up, and in a great humility, he says, "My father appeared to me in a dream, and he said that the Shekhinah has passed to Rabbi Dovber in the Maggid of Mizrich. In the Maggid of Mizrich, we'll talk about it in a future video, God willing, he ends up being a tremendous organizer and really establishes the Chassidic movement for decades to come." Centuries to come, I should say. So what we have here, the legacy of the Baal Shem Tov is, number one, the fact that today the Chassidic movement is a gigantic movement, meaning people who identify outwardly as Chassidim. Many dynasties end up coming from the Baal Shem Tov that exist till today, as well as all Judaism, even people who claim today who are opposed to Chassidus, which the opposition to Chassidus that Chassidus was outside of Judaism, God forbid, that had waned not long after, and by the beginning of the 19th century, that was over. But as far as even people who claim they are against the teaching of Chassidus, so they don't teach the Chassidus, they have been influenced a lot by the Chassidic movement, whether their families are originally Chassidic families, or things they might not even realize that they practice or they do, or thought methods, or the idea of being that we're Jewish and therefore we do mitzvahs. These kind of ideas that are today mainstream Judaism are all really sourced in the Chassidic movement. So we have the direct people who identify as Chassidim. Chassidus ends up influencing all of Judaism, and of course we have the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, which end up being developed by his students and their students until this day, where we have so many teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, even though he himself did not write any books, which ends up being controversial. But his students wrote down his teachings. Some of them may not have written them as the Baal Shem Tov spoke in Yiddish, and they wrote them down in Hebrew. So there was a little bit of miscommunication, which ended up fueling some of the opposition in those early generations. But the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, as they were taught and written down by his students and their students, end up giving insight into the Torah and insight into Judaism that affects and influences people to this day. Thank you very much for joining. If you have any questions, comments, something I should have said, something that I missed, if I made a mistake, let us know in the comments. We love feedback, and we'll see you next time.